Hello! So, unlike my other talking videos, the only tea we're going to be discussing here is metaphorical. So please join me and my hideous but very comfortable chair as we talk about ghosting. I feel like there's a spectrum of ghosting definitions, so just so we're all on the same page, I'm going to define ghosting. Ghosting is when you suddenly disappear off the face of the earth and refuse to make contact with someone you're connected to. Before we get more into it, here are 4 things that do not count as ghosting. The first one is disconnecting for your own safety. Like if you're in an abusive relationship and you can leave, leave. In the case that they're toxic and they're not dangerous but you want to disconnect, let them know once that you won't be in contact, assert your boundaries, and hopefully they'll respect it. If they go ahead and contact you, I consider that violating your boundaries, and if you don't respond to them, it's very okay. So number 2 is if somebody is flaky and they forget to respond once or twice, it's annoying, but it's not ghosting. Alright, so third is not responding to anything conversation ending or effortless. Finally, people drop contact if you did something to really hurt them. If you violated their trust or something, I don't want to give advice on that because I don't have context or details or anything. Something I learned that really validated my feelings is that ghosting a friend or ghosting someone to break up with them, whatever, is actually emotional abuse. And giving someone the silent treatment is also emotional abuse. Unless it's for those reasons I gave above, like misunderstandings or those extreme reasons, then if someone ghosts, they are in the wrong. But despite this, that doesn't mean they're necessarily evil people or terrible people. It's just because ghosters ghost for 2 reasons. So the first is that they're fear-based, they're scared. They're scared of confrontation, of having to face your pain, of maybe having to feel like a not so great person. So the second reason is that they're emotionally immature. So someone who solves their problems by running away is mentally still a child. It doesn't matter how mature they act on the outside despite that, or how old they are. Chronic ghosters think they're making their lives easier and less painful, but instead they're actually increasing their sense of emptiness and misery on the inside because human beings need intimacy. Now I'll talk about attachment styles because learning this literally changed my life. After learning attachment styles, I understood both myself and others in ways I never would otherwise. It was like a psychological code breaker. One book I recommend is Attached by Amir Levine and Rachel Heller. So there are 4 attachment styles: secure, which is healthy, ideal; anxious or anxious preoccupied, which is where you're clinging more. So we're actually not going to talk about that one. Then there are the 2 avoidant styles. So we're mostly going to talk about the one called dismissive avoidant rather than fearful avoidant. While fearful avoidant does run away, dismissive avoidant is like the epitome of a ghoster. Dismissive avoidants, or we can call them DAs, they take their need for independence to the extreme. And they're usually very social. They love to form lots of shallow relationships with acquaintances. But when it comes to closer relationships, then they freak out and run away. In order to rationalize their reason for ghosting, leaving, they tell themselves they don't need anyone, and their brain will start to find flaws in whoever tries to get close. Like even ridiculous flaws, or flaws that to somebody else looking in aren't present at all. If you were really close to this person and suddenly it got to a point where they were like snapping at you or biting your head off over something, that's where their brain is twisting things to make them see you as an enemy, to make them see you as someone with too many flaws to tolerate. Basically, this is a big defense mechanism, and at that point, no matter what you do, it's not right. You can do no right in their eyes. And another reason I liked the book Attached is because they don't just give this to you as some dense concept. They provide real-life examples of all the different styles, and it's easy to recognize yourself or someone else in them. Anyway, as an avoidant myself, I'm the other type of avoidant. It's a struggle to not run away or not pick out flaws in people, because now I know what my brain is doing. I think the other type of avoidant, fearful avoidance, they ghost too, but not as much as dismissive avoidance, because fearful avoidants like to keep people at arm's length and they run away as soon as they feel like they're being rejected. But at the same time, if they find someone they really care about, then they might end up clinging like an anxious attachment. Basically, being a fearful avoidant is this exhausting dance of, do I run away or do I try to hold on? So basically, it's them, not you. It doesn't matter how good times used to be, you want somebody considerate and consistent who stays, not someone who runs away. At one point, I decided I'm going to avoid all avoidance, which is ironic for me to say in many ways. Anyway, make sure you know the difference between dismissive avoidance and narcissists. I'm going to put a handy dandy chart here that I will hopefully remember to add as I edit, and then we'll move on to more psychology. My worst ghosting experience was I was ghosted by a friend I knew since we were 6, so that was almost 20 years of friendship. So to most people that sounds super messed up, but to me, I blamed myself as I tended to do. And then later, I realized, oh, this girl is a textbook dismissive avoidant and a textbook example of someone who has real power issues. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing or something to judge, because it's so common for people to have power and control issues. I know I definitely did, but I'm using this example because it really connects to ghosting. So this friend, I'll call her Chloe, which is like technically pretty close to her name, but she's so not a Chloe. But anyway, she placed a lot of importance on status markers, I guess you could call them, like a high salary or how many people were attracted to her. And I think it's very telling that she specifically hated people who took markers of status into account. If there's some characteristic or quirk you really hate, usually it's because it's something you hate about yourself. Obviously, this doesn't always apply, that's for another video, etc., etc. I noticed she was legitimately proud of any manipulative or untrustworthy traits that she possessed, and she would often ghost people or leave people on red for saying something that annoyed her or that she took as an insult, because she easily took things as insults. Although usually it was just because she was flaky, so I realized way too late that this all points to insecurity surrounding power. So people like this don't have an inner healthy sense of power, and whether subconsciously or consciously, ghosting people can be like a fix to them. Like they'll see themselves in a higher, more powerful position. My hard and fast rule is that if someone loves themselves, they will treat those around them with love and respect. Things like narcissism or superiority complexes don't point to someone who loves themselves too much. Instead, I find it points to the opposite. But that's for a different video, and now let's focus on the most important person, you. This is going to sound super cliche, but the best thing you can do with these type of situations is make the best of them, use them to grow and become stronger. So for me, after learning all this psychology and going through all this, I feel like a ghosting pro. And something that's been helpful for me and a way I can give back is going on support groups on Reddit. Like there's, X no contact or ghosting, which is maybe how some of you have come to this video. But basically it's great to give advice and then be able to share my feelings and receive support in return. Recently, one of my good friends, IRL, was dealing with an avoidant personality and she had no idea what was happening. So I'm like, okay, this is what he's all about. This is what's going through his head, basically. Another way I use bad experiences is reflecting upon what type of people or experiences or themes show up repeatedly in my life. I notice a pattern and it's suddenly like the chaos has meaning. I didn't realize until Chloe that abandonment had been a huge theme in my life, from friends, family, all from a very young age. My first real experience with ghosting was from one of my best friends in elementary school. Or let's call her Rachel. No, that's her real name because I don't care. This happened when I was like 10. It was this really weird instance of real life ghosting. So whenever I tried to talk to Rachel, she would ignore me or just literally stare straight ahead unless there was a teacher nearby to see. Of course, I was like begging her to tell me what was wrong, kept asking, I was killing myself over it and blaming myself because that's what I always did, even as a little kid. At one point when my mom was in this mom group with her, she asked her what the deal was. Apparently what I did wrong was talk about a show she didn't care about. And to add insult to injury, that show didn't come out until the year she started ghosting me, so it had only come up in one of the few conversations we even had. I think that was only when we were at some sort of mutual friends party and she's talking to me and I'm like, oh, I got my friend back, yay! So anyway, the reasoning was that ridiculous, but I come from a family of people pleasers, so their response was like, you shouldn't talk about that show so much, you're annoying her, you should stop. Whenever I had any misunderstandings or problems with people, the advice was always, you gotta change that about yourself. So eventually I did, and from middle school through my early 20s, I just mirrored everyone's personality and did what I could to get each person I talked to like me. It became so natural and easy to change myself every minute that I didn't know what my actual personality was. And it wasn't until just a few years ago that I learned that, oh, what I'm doing isn't good for me or anyone else. And the reason I changed was because of middle school bullies, not Rachel, but it didn't even matter with her because she actually did this to all her friends. I was just the first. She was obsessed with popularity, which I can relate to, and she just basically dumped each friend going up the social ladder and just left a trail of people behind her who hated her. Also, the show I was talking about was Avatar: The Last Airbender, so her loss. But anyway, I've had quite a few Rachels in my life, and all for the stupidest reasons. It was always me blindsided, blaming myself, wondering what in the world I'd done, only to find out that these people are chronic backstabbers. It wasn't until my most recent Rachel, which was Chloe, that I examined my life and found this recurring cycle. It sounds counterintuitive, but from this I actually learned finally how to love myself. I learned red flags in people and also the signs of a true friend. I just made so much progress on myself and how I approach relationships. And these are relationships of any kind. Friends, family, dating, etc. I actually got ghosted by a friend recently and I handled it so differently. Over the last several months, I noticed that a couple of my messages to her were left unread. And so I'm like, okay, just tell me if I did something, you know? So that gets me left unread again. And then finally, I think about her again because her birthday comes around. And I'm like, okay, I know I didn't do anything. We barely talked. I did not do anything. Like, maybe something happened to her. Maybe her Gemini tendencies were extra strong. You know what? I'm going to just wish her a happy birthday and maybe see what the deal is. So I'm like, hey, it's been a while. Happy birthday. And she's like, oh, hey, I'm sorry I disappeared. How are you? And I'm just like, yeah, just glad you're okay. You know, she's been doing her own thing, traveling a lot and whatever. But most importantly, I was at that point where I could see it as a test from the universe, and I was so proud of how I approached it. In the past, I would feel really hurt, take it super personally, and then unfollow or block because it was just so hard seeing their social media. Now, I don't feel like I have to do that to protect myself. And obviously I'm not perfect or done with lessons or anything, but I'm just such a different person than I was with Chloe. If you look closely at yourself or somebody else, you can see these recurring themes, and maybe ghosting is one of them for you. And I think these things pop up in our lives because we are meant to finally overcome them and become the best people we can be. And like I said, it takes something that was so chaotic and hopeless and adds meaning to it. Alright, so that's it. I hope this helped, even a little. The next talking video will have tea. It'll probably be rooibos because your girl's anemic.